All right, everybody, welcome back. Ready to give those brains a workout.
Always up for a challenge. What are we diving into today?
Today, we're tackling a topic that might sound a little, well, snoozeworthy at first. Mensuration.
Mensuration, like measuring stuff.
Exactly. But before you tune out thinking it's all just boring math class flashbacks, trust me on this one. We're cracking open a textbook chapter, literally titled Mensuration, to uncover the surprisingly practical side of perimeter and area.
Okay, I'm intrigued. You've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Because, let's be real, who hasn't stared at a weirdly shaped garden wondering how much fencing to buy? Or tried to squeeze a new rug into their living room only to realize it's like an inch too short?
Ugh, don't even get me started on rug mishaps. I feel like those measure twice, cut once sayings were made for a reason.
Absolutely. And that's exactly where understanding perimeter and area comes in handy. It's about taking those abstract math concepts and turning them into practical tools we can use every single day.
So where do we start? Back to the textbook.
You got it. And first up, let's break down perimeter. Think of it as the distance around a closed figure. Like, imagine you're tracing the outline of something.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like the total length of all of the sides of a shape added together.
You got it. Like if you had, say, a square garden and you wanted to build a little fence around it, you'd need to know the perimeter to figure out how much fencing material to buy.
Right. Otherwise, you risk a half-fenced garden and some confused-looking plants.
Exactly. Or let's say you're a marathon runner and you're trying to map out your training route. Knowing the perimeter of a park or a neighborhood block can help you track your distance and plan your runs effectively.
So perimeter is basically our go-to for anything involving the outer boundary of a shape. It's about understanding those outer limits.
And speaking of understanding, remember that handy-dandy formula for finding the perimeter of a rectangle? Perimeter equals 2 times the length plus the breadth.
Oh, yeah, the one they drilled into us in school?
It's a classic for a reason, especially when you're dealing with more complex shapes. The textbook even gives an example of an athlete running laps around a park that's, say, 50 meters long and 25 meters wide. Using that formula, boom, you can quickly figure out the total distance covered in each lap.
It's all about working smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly. And you know what's even cooler? This whole perimeter thing isn't just limited to rectangles. Think about other shapes you see all the time. Squares, triangles, even those funky hexagons.
Hexagons, those always seemed a little intimidating.
They can be, but once you get the hang of it, it's like unlocking a whole new level of geometric comprehension. Like imagine you're building a gazebo in your backyard and you decide to get all fancy and make it hexagonal shaped.
Okay, I'm picturing it. It's looking very elegant.
Right. But now you need to figure out how much wood to buy for the railing that goes around the edge. That's where knowing how to calculate the perimeter of a hexagon comes in handy.
So no matter how complex or unique the shape, there's a way to figure out its perimeter.
You got it. And that's the beauty of this whole mensuration thing. It's like having a secret decoder ring for the shapes around us.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light. You've officially demystified perimeter for me.
Glad to hear it. But we've only just scratched the surface. Now let's move on to the space inside those boundaries. Area. All right, so we've tackled perimeter, the whole outline thing. But now let's dive into the space enclosed within those lines, area.
Area. Now that's where things get really practical, wouldn't you say?
Totally. Think about it. Have you ever tried painting a room without knowing how much paint to buy?
Oh, tell me about it. One time, I grossly underestimated the area of my kitchen wall. Ended up making 3 trips to the hardware store.
Oh, no. The classic DIY dilemma. And it all comes back to area. It's about understanding how much surface a shape covers. Our trusty textbook uses a great analogy of visualizing shapes on grid paper.
Right, like those little squares we used to count back in elementary school.
Exactly. You're basically counting squares to figure out the area. The textbook even gets into those tricky situations with half squares and irregular shapes, which, let's be honest, is way more true to life than just dealing with perfect squares and rectangles all the time.
Totally. Because who has a perfectly square living room? Am I right? But those irregular shapes can make calculating area a bit more challenging.
True, but that's where having some go-to formulas can really come in handy. Like, remember the formula for the area of a rectangle? Area equals length times breadth.
Of course. It's one of those formulas that sticks with you.
It's a classic for a reason. Let's say you're trying to figure out how much fabric you'd need to cover a rectangular table. You measure the length, measure the breadth, plug those numbers into the formula, and bam, you've got your area. No need to painstakingly count individual squares on a grid.
Talk about a time saver. And I'm guessing this whole area concept comes in handy for all sorts of home improvement projects.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine you're tiling your bathroom floor. Knowing the area helps you calculate exactly how many tiles you'll need to cover the entire space. The textbook even walks through a really practical example of covering a room with square tiles, taking into account the size of each tile.
I'm all about those real-world examples. They really help drive the point home, don't they?
Yeah.
It's one thing to understand the theory, but seeing how it applies to everyday situations makes it click.
Exactly. Like, okay, I get that area is the space inside a shape. But when you put it in the context of something like tiling a floor or figuring out how much wallpaper you need, it suddenly becomes way more relatable and way less intimidating.
Absolutely. You're not just memorizing formulas anymore. You're actually using math to solve real-life problems and make more informed decisions.
Which is what we're all about here, empowerment through knowledge, right?
100%. And I have to say, I'm feeling pretty empowered right now.
Me too.
Yeah.
So we've covered perimeter and area, but we're not done yet. There's a whole other side to mensuration that we need to unpack. You know, it's funny how something like mensuration, which sounded kind of intimidating at first, turns out to be so incredibly practical.
Right. I'm already finding myself looking at things differently. Like last night I was rearranging my furniture, and I actually busted out the measuring tape to figure out, if I had enough space to squeeze in that new bookshelf.
See, I love that. You're thinking like a true mensuration master. It's like you've unlocked a secret level of spatial awareness.
And the best part is, it's not about memorizing a bunch of complicated formulas. It's about understanding the basic concepts like, okay, perimeter is the distance around a shape, area is the space inside, and then being able to apply those concepts to real-life situations.
Exactly. So whether you're planning a DIY project, designing a garden, or just trying to figure out if that giant pizza box will actually fit through your front door, mensuration has got you covered.
It's true. And you know what? I think one of the most valuable things we've learned from this deep dive is that math isn't just some abstract subject we learned in school. It's all around us.
100%. And once you start to see those connections, it's like a whole new world opens up.
It's like you're seeing the world with fresh eyes, noticing the shapes, the patterns, the way things fit together.
Exactly. So next time you're out and about, take a moment to really look around. Notice the shapes of buildings, the layout of streets, the designs on clothing. It's all mensuration in action.
And who knows, you might even surprise yourself with how much you already know. You got this.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating world of mensuration. We hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have.